Under the stark Nordic skies, a string of unsolved murders in Finland's remote forests casts a shadow over the landscape. Helena's escape was a race against death. In the biting chill of a Finnish winter's eve, her lungs burned with each gasping breath of frostbitten air. The stark moonlight cast long, haunting shadows between the trees as she stumbled over the icy terrain, her heart thundering louder than her pursuer's footsteps. This was Järvenpää, a place where sinister secrets lay buried beneath the snow. As the echo of her frantic footsteps faded into the night, Helena's tale of a narrow escape would soon entwine with the grim saga of the Hausjärvi gravel pit murders. A saga that held the nation of Finland in its icy grips. A puzzle pieced with shadows and fear. This is not the recounted survival, it's the unraveling of a mystery that lurks in the silent, frost-laden floor of a Finnish gravel pit. Welcome back to another episode of Making Fun of Dead People, and we're going to be looking at a string of potential serial killers in Finland, and I just want to thank you for joining us. This one is eerie. In the quaint town of Hausjärvi, where the whispers of the past kind of blend seamlessly into the present, lived Helena Meriläinen. A spirited 39-year-old, was well-loved and a figure in her close-knit community. November 22nd, 1990. So as dusk cast long shadows in the quiet town, Helena bid farewell to her friends after a joyful gathering. The laughter still echoed in her ears as she made her way onto the Järvenpää train station. As the night unfolds, its eerie arms, Helena awaited her train. The distant sounds of the tracks hummed a tune of anticipation. But destiny had a different tune. A dark-haired man, his eyes harboring unspoken horror. He approached her, offered her a ride home, something that seemed like a warm escape on a cold night. Little did she know that this ride would veer off into the abyss of terror. As she nestled into the car's hushed interior, the world outside seemed to blur into oblivion. The man's chatter slowly morphed into an eerie silence as the car deviated from its familiar path, pulling onto a small road leading into a desolate gravel pit. So one thing I just want to mention, it's odd, but I might be a little bit of a gravel pit expert for some weird reason, but in this case, so you have a gravel pit, it is typically going to be very isolated, very dark, because most areas where they exist, you want to put limits on residences being too close because it's so noisy and dusty and it's not healthy. So it's like a dark, poorly lit place, usually, especially at night. And the very design of these things is actually this dark hole in the earth, and as loud as you scream, nobody could hear it. So the reality of Helena's peril struck as the man suddenly grasped her, and now his intentions became dreadfully clear to her. The struggle ensues inside the car, and there's nobody around but the two of them. So this tranquil night turns into something out of a horror movie as she's screaming and fighting this guy, and I'm assuming at that point she knows that he either wants to rape or kill her. I couldn't imagine how terrifying it would be, to be honest. Just horrible. Helena wasn't one, not that any victim just gives in, but she truly was a fighter. And she had this surge of strength and managed to wriggle free from this guy. And somehow she convinces her legs to run, because she does, because this is rugged terrain. You've got rocks, you got boulders, holes in the ground, all this stuff. And she's gone. As the distance between her and this dark-haired figure grew wider, her heart is pounding in her chest. Her lungs are burning. Each thump of her heart is a testimony to the dance with death that she just endured. This guy didn't follow her. And so as that night grew further and further past, Helena could not be aware of the untold horrors in that very same gravel pit, which we're going to get into. If you enjoy the show, something you could do to help me out is just give us a nice rating or maybe click follow. The morning after Helena kind of reports this to the police, the whole town, this is a small town of Hausjärvi, is awake to this kind of crazy story. So the news of Helena's encounter, I'm sure, is like front page for everybody. And people are wondering if there's like a predator among us, or if this, I couldn't imagine, small town rumors. We'll just leave it at that. So the police do swing into action. They up their patrols in the area, and they try to collect as much evidence as possible. The investigators went through the crime scene looking for forensics and whatever else, I guess, they would use as evidence at that time. The 90s, that stuff was just coming into its adoption, depending on what country you're in. But there wasn't any clear answers at the time. So at this time of Helena's attack, there's no real answers given to the public, and rumors swirl around. So amidst the rising fear in the community of not having answers, emerges another story. Tuula Lukkarinen, a tender-hearted 28 years old whose whole life was ahead of her. With the rhythms of town, Tuula, a young mother, was a beacon of love and hope for her little family. Her warm smile was a familiar sight in the quaint streets of Hausjärvi. Her gentle presence, a soothing balm on the fresh wounds of fear that had gripped the town. Tuula, everyone knows who she is. And Tuula, her world revolved around her little one. After Helena's attack, the calendar pages flip, marking the onset of spring in April 1991. Spring is synonymous with new life. It's juxtaposed against the horror that was about to happen. The once clear skies seemed to hold on almost to a ominous grayness, a harbinger of the storm that was brewing. So on the dawn of Tuula, on this particular day, Tuula found herself embroiled in a custody case meeting concerning her beloved child. The emotional weight of the circumstance bore down upon her, yet her resolve remained kind of like very steadfast. Tuula had been in a psychiatric care, and Tuula was trying to work with the doctors and stuff to get to where essentially she wanted him to come home into her care. Tuula went to the Kalasoki Psychiatric Hospital on the morning of April 17, 1991 to attend a custody meeting for her son. The meeting, though, in this case, she never arrives at. It's stated by witnesses she's last spotted at 9 a.m. in Järvenpää in front of a liquor store, and later in the center of Riihimäki that evening. On the very next day, in the afternoon, her body is found by a landowner who lives in the village. The area had been hit by a blizzard the night before. It seems like that her body was found before people even had a chance to really report her missing. Investigators combed this crime scene on report of the body. So the crime scene itself in the fresh snow was horrific in just about every possible way. You have every shred of evidence, every bit of blood that is either covered up by the snow or on top of the snow. But you have all the evidence of how the struggle went down. You have the footprints, the marks in the snow of where it's literally telling the story of how they were attacked and murdered, how they fought back, and all of these things. I couldn't imagine. But all the evidence is collected, it's cataloged by the investigators, but unfortunately, it doesn't reveal a whole lot other than the cause of death was homicide. And yeah, this is clearly reeking of foul play, no doubt about that. The police do discover the instrument of murder, but they don't disclose it. And the site investigators that said at the time had to use hair dryers to literally melt the snow and go through the crime scene piece by piece. The crime scene investigation at that time involved like tracking dogs, the technical site analysis, but it really didn't get much. DNA analysis was not that advanced, as I mentioned back then. So over the years, with new technology and methods, they've been able to start to test more and more, but the investigators haven't really disclosed any of the details because they're keeping this really tight lip to protect the integrity of the investigation. And to some extent, there's something to be said about letting the perpetrator start to feel safe. So they really don't get anywhere, but that's not the end of this story, because again, in that same town where the horrors kind of ripple, something shocking is about to be discovered. So on the dawn of August 5th, 1993, a young person named Marit Ponti, a vivacious 24-year-old, was looking forward to an evening of partying and hanging out with friends at our local tavern. As it dipped below the horizon, the nightlife just kicking off. But as the night unfolds, something sinister lurks. At some point during the evening, the group separates. Marit tries to rejoin the group, but is refused for being drunk. Marit is alone outside the tavern. This is the last known sighting of her. She's waiting for a ride, and she's last seen getting into an unidentified car, which drives off, making it the last known sighting of Marit. When dawn arrived without a return, concern spreads rapidly. Searches commenced, echoing the grim efforts that followed Tuula Lukkarisen's disappearance. But despite exhaustive efforts, Marit's fate remained a haunting mystery. The police start investigating Marit's disappearance, especially knowing the grim history of the region's unsolved cases. They collect witness statements, and the last known sighting of Marit in the unidentified vehicle does give them a model, but not much more than that. So the investigation to Marit's disappearance unfolds with a sense of urgency. The police are obviously aware that there's a serial offender, and detectives cast a wide net. They take witness statements, they comb through the tavern, they look at the known whereabouts about Marit. The community is shaken from the attack and the other body that was found. The rustic brew where Marit was last seen did become a focal point of the investigation. Rumors start to surge, and there's a lot of case theories, there's a lot of speculation. We're going to get into that. But these three cases do seem to share for sure a connection. So Marit's case, like the other two we discussed, is unsolved to this day. And this is terrifying for this small town. Like, at the time, to be subjected to the kind of this level of violence, but like in a short period of time, feeling very vulnerable. If you had a daughter, sister, mom, whatever, it'd be terrifying. And it definitely has all the earmarks of a serial killer. But only the police could really answer that question. They're very tight-lipped on it. So there's no doubt that women were targeted. So that's the first thing we'll talk a little bit about before we get into the kind of theories and speculations. And the fact that it's fucking crazy this is still unsolved. We have all three crimes within a short period of time. We have the women that were between their 20s and 30s, like that age, and all taken during the night. Now, none of these things on its own really means one thing or the other, so you have that commonality. The weird part is the geographical part of this, and that being the gravel pit. Now, in the third case, there's no known connection to the gravel pit. However, the speculation that we'll get into later does say that could be the case. So in two of these cases, the geographical part is chilling in itself. It's the fact that it's at this specific gravel pit that clearly is picked by this predator ahead of time. So the geographical part of this being that two of these crimes, as we know, occurred in the same gravel. So the next part that's looking at the geographical, if it is the same killer, the geographical part of his MO is the gravel pit. It's not unheard of I'm going to go back and say that this is significant, because it's not like they used the gravel pit and then buried him, which is what, ideally, if you're going to commit a crime in a gravel pit, that would seem like the attraction, is that there's a lot of either topsoil or sand or gravel that you can hide a body with. But it doesn't seem like in the certain case, even though there's snow, you probably still could do it, because what you'll have is these piles of sand or gravel in the gravel pits that everything else might be frozen, but that stuff is still diggable year round. So it just doesn't make sense why, like a gravel pit would be chosen randomly and then no attempt is made to really bury the body. So it's confusing. The one thing I will say, though, is that it could be a coincidence. Could be. But it's a bad luck gravel pit. Better hope you're not driving on the road that was paved with the cement from there. Yeah, the other thing is that we have the time span, as I mentioned. So the crimes occurring over a 3-year span, that could definitely indicate that they're connected. But 3 data points isn't a lot to go on, so it's really not that clear to me. The thing that's clearest to me, though, is the gravel pit. Confidence that they had to leave the murder weapon and no attempt to hide the body. To me, that's significant. I don't know exactly what it necessarily means, but that's a significant detail, because the person didn't feel like they needed to hide the body when it could have been very easy to. And secondly, that this location was chosen likely because it was dark and isolated, and probably would have had to have been chosen in advance for this to be the case. That's significant. The predator themselves, it's hard to say. Police haven't released profiles to the public that I know of or was able to find. And actually, I will say this. Google Translate does a pretty good job with the Finnish newspapers. So I'm not sponsored by them. I don't have any sponsors, but if you know somebody that wants to sponsor me, I could use the ad dollars, man. I like money. I don't have a lot, but I like it. Anyway, the psychological profiling in this case definitely is something that would, like, only the police really would know, but it seems like your cookie cutter serial killer, if that's the case, they're just targeting young, vulnerable women. And they probably suck in real life too. Not the women, the serial killer guy. Who, this dark-haired figure reported by witnesses. And he sucks. So, piecing together all the pieces of information available publicly, a lot of stories circulate on the internet. There's a lot of speculation. I'll get into kind of the stories that are being told out there. So the main one is that there is a serial killer or serial predator on the loose still in Finland, that someone came from outside of the area, hence maybe the confidence about not burying the bodies. It's the 90s. There's not security cameras everywhere. And you have the fact that it's the same gravel pit for 2 of the crimes. You have the 3rd crime, which there's nothing that significantly connects it other than same age and the same kind of mysterious circumstances, getting into a car. So there is definitely enough to paint the picture that there's a serial predator here, but definitely there's not enough to convince me that is the case. But I'm going to hone in on that again. That's such a significant fact that in the case of the snow-covered death where the young Tuula that was found by the landowner, that they really could have delayed at least the investigation significantly by hiding the body a little better. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. The copycat theory. Okay. So the copycat theory, this is a few things. One, somebody gets inspired by the first crime and then goes out and decides to do it for themselves. Or being that now they see this as an opportunity to commit a crime they wanted to commit, being that it would probably be blamed on someone else. it's definitely a possibility, or it's a possibility that it is just unconnected perpetrators that happen to have somewhat similar MOs. Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think based upon everything that I know and the police being so tight-lipped about that murder weapon, that somehow that they feel confident that this is solved. That's what I'm going to say. And that likely the person who did this is still alive. Otherwise, we probably know more. We also have out there, one, in my opinion, is that these weren't sexual predator type crimes. They are more like a robbery. You get into a taxi, maybe to get home, or a stranger, and the robbery goes wrong. Seems unlikely. The only thing I'll say with the fact that it could be multiple perpetrators is that in a small town, if there is like the closest or one, like might have a gravel pit where everyone goes to, it's not that crazy to think that two separate offenders might have used that same locale. However, it seems like an illogical place. Like, it just doesn't add up to me. It seems, yeah, it's possible. Is it probable? Probably not. The one that I doubt the most is the third one. I haven't seen. There is another case that I think there has been mentioned as potentially being linked to this. In 1989, a person went missing from the same town, and it's published in like Finnish media. The 13-year-old woman had exited a restaurant and man offered them a ride, but it couldn't be corroborated because this was brought up by the victim of this crime. So this person is robbed, but this person survives this encounter in 1989. However, this woman dies years later, and it's actually the mother that kind of brings this story up. So there's no way to corroborate it. The one thing that surprised me is that the third body has not been found, and that could be pivotal in that case. In that case, I find it very well could happen. The police do have some evidence. Enough time goes by, there's a good chance this could still be solved. But yeah, like it is getting to be, I don't want to say how long it is because I feel old. So it's been a long time. But there is some kind of potential serial killer in Finland that could still be alive this day. And I hope the police get him hopefully the police catch up to him. So there is some renewed resurgence in the investigative efforts. There's been some pushes, not just actually there was like a TV documentary on it, and there was some push from like new technology. As things come up, the police are all over it, but there's nothing really coming to light. It was reported, let me just go, yeah, unfortunately they're continually working on this, and we'll have to wait and see. I would imagine that after a certain amount of time would lapse, the police may start to release more and more information on this, just out of the fact that people involved or people surrounding it will have passed away. So as I leave you all sad and depressed about another unsolved mystery, I'd love to, after you listen to this, let me know if you think that these crimes are connected. If you have a theory, if you've heard about this, I'd love to hear about it, and drop a comment. Appreciate you listening every week, and I'd love that follow if you can do that. And yeah, that's a couple more unsolved cases of people meeting unfortunate end, and hopefully, I don't want to say not the last, but we know it won't be. See you. Actually, I'm going to Costa Rica in the end of the week, So I'm going to try to still upload next Tuesday, but realistically it might be delayed. I'm just telling you that right now. I will do my best, but I will, one way or the other, I'll try to find out a way to let you know. Thank you.